trabalhar fazendo o bem. É realmente o caminho real da felicidade.
Eu tenho conhecimento de que Chico Xavier é a maior antena mediúnica do planeta de todos os tempos.
Tem muito ainda dessas grandes mensagens que ele trouxe para a gente compreender.
Esse contato dele com os espíritos não era só na reunião, era lá tomando café. A gente até já sabia, quando ele olhava assim para cima, pronto.
Ele literalmente vivia em dois mundos.
É o resultado de um trabalho, de realmente incorporar aquilo como um propósito para servir ao Senhor.
Eu fico me perguntando o que ele não fez de forma plena.
Nas universidades da Austrália, da Nova Zelândia, ele já tem centro acadêmico com seu nome.
Eu acredito que o Chico Xavier possa ser a reencarnação de Allan Kardec.
Chico Xavier escrevendo é uma coisa, Chico Xavier vivendo em nós é muito diferente.
O amor exalava espontaneamente dessa personalidade admirável Chico Xavier.
Amar sem esperar ser amado e sem aguardar recompensa alguma. Amar sempre.
Good morning, everyone. So nice to be here once again with all of you, watching the series of lives organized by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm Tanya Schwartz, and today I'll be very happy to bring our friend and special guest, SUZANA SIMÔES from Florida, who is going to be talking to us about mastering relative happiness. Hi, SUZANA. Before we get to hear the teachings and everything that SUZANA is bringing to us, we're going to do our usual prayer to connect with the high spirits for this morning, for the inspiration this morning. So for a moment, for those of you who'd like to close your eyes so we can concentrate, we connect with our spiritual friends, thanking them for this opportunity, for being with us, inspiring us, and asking for them to be all the way helping us open our minds and our hearts to understand the lessons and bring to our daily lives. Thank you, spiritual friends. Thank you, SUZANA, for being with us, and so be it. So before we ask SUZANA to start bringing these lessons, I'm going to introduce you more formally. For those of you who don't know SUZANA, SUZANA SIMÔES is an active worker of the Spiritist movement. Dr. Simões spends her time between her professional work as a doctor of physical therapy, her family, and the dissemination of Spiritism. SUZANA has worked as a member of the Spiritist Federation of Florida and the Spiritist Federation of the United States. She's one of the founders of the Conscious Living Spiritist Group in Miami, where she works primarily overseeing the work in English. She's an active speaker in the US and abroad. Hi, SUZANA. Nice having you here with us. You're mute.
My apologies. Hi, everybody. Hi, Tanya. Thank you for having me.
And I would like to let everybody know that we'll be taking some questions at the end of your talk. So feel free to send your questions, and we'll be talking shortly right after Susana brings the talk about mastering relative happiness. The word is yours, Susana. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, it's very nice to be here. I see some friendly names already, Bob, Abigail, and others. So today we are going to be talking about relative happiness, something that we all pursue, something that we, I think it's a common topic among cultures, among people in all parts of the globe, regardless of where they are, what their background is, what their belief system is. We are humans, and we are all in search of happiness. So we are going to look at today trying to understand first what is not happiness, and then what is happiness, and finally how we can master and achieve the greatest amount of happiness today. We often talk about happiness for the future life, but I'm really quite interested in exploring today the possibility of being happy now in the present moment. And that's hopefully what we'll accomplish by the end of today's talk. I would like to start, and let me just see if I can change. Yes, bringing up some questions, right? What is happiness? So it would be interesting to see, if I could talk to you and if you could answer me right now, right? How do you define happiness? And we probably would notice that we would have some different, maybe some similar answers to this question. But another interesting thing to think about is, do the things that made you happy like 15, 20 years ago are the same things that make you happy today? And if they are not, then, again, what is happiness truly about, right? If you were given like all the resources necessary to be, let's say, very wealthy, right? Where would you put those resources on, right? How would you manage those resources in order to be happy? So those are just some like basic questions to get us warmed up for the talk. And we are going to, before we try to define what is not happiness, we are going to go to the Spirit's book and the Gospel to help us out with some introductory ideas that can set up the tone for our talk today, which is very much a study of the Spirit's book and some questions of the Spirit's book. I think it's important from time to time that we go back to Allan Kardec, which is the basis, which is the codifier of Spiritism. And I feel that sometimes nowadays we are drifting too far away from Kardec. So I made a point of bringing Kardec to this presentation and really basing the presentation on the principles that we find in the Spirit's book and the Gospel according to Spiritism. So when we go to question 920, Kardec is going to ask the spirits if it's possible for human beings to enjoy complete happiness on this earth. And the spirits are going to say that life on earth is given to us as trials and expiations. So let's stop right there and translate that from English to English by saying the answer is no. Complete happiness is not possible, because if we live in a planet of trials and expiations, it is a planet that is equivalent and relative to our level of evolution, of consciousness, of awareness, and understanding of the law, which is minimal at this point, I would say. Therefore, we are going to naturally make many mistakes, many errors, and deal with the consequences of those, which are going to be situations of discomfort, a lot of times of unhappiness, of difficulties, of pain, of suffering. So I think it's really important that we understand that, right? So complete happiness is just something, is a fantasy for now. It's not a fantasy for the immortal spirit, but it's a fantasy for us where we stand. So it's important that we set up the conversation by understanding that this is not possible. But the spirits are going to continue by saying it depends on us to mitigate our misfortunes and be as happy as possible. And you see that little number 1 there, because that's the first important tip for our reflection today. So we, although complete happiness is not possible, we have some power in our hands, which is the power to mitigate, to minimize, to decrease our misfortunes, and to be as happy as possible here on earth. Very well, that idea is also found in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 5, item 20. Let's see what the spirits tell Kardec right here. They will say, in general terms, one can affirm that happiness is a utopia, the search for which successive generations have set out without ever being able to reach it. For if a wise individual is a rarity in this world, an absolutely happy one is not any easier to find. So again,
sorry, I missed that. Could you say it again, please?
I'm sorry, my phone is talking. So it is the same idea. So basically telling us that this idea of complete happiness is really not suitable for the planet and the circumstances that we live in. Very well. On question 921, the spirits are going to tell to Kardec that completely happiness is not possible. Kardec is going to ask the spirits, completely happiness is not possible. Okay, I get it. But meanwhile, is it possible for anyone to enjoy a relative happiness? And I put just the first sentence of the answer that the spirits gave to Kardec. They're going to say, most of the time they are artisan of their own unhappiness. So tip number 2, people. Tip number 1, we have the power to mitigate our own suffering. Tip number 2, we are the artisans. We are the ones who are, for most part, producing our own unhappiness right here and right now. Spiritists love to take the Spiritist philosophy and sometimes kind of twist it on their favor, or so they like to say things, for example, well, that was probably something that comes from an error or a mistake done in the past that I am expiating right now, for example. The spirits will argue with that, and they will tell us that the majority of the sufferings and the struggles that we deal in the present moment are being created by us in the present moment. So let's look at what the gospel says in regards to that. Source of earthly misfortunes. Humans are, in the majority of the cases, the artisans of their own misfortunes. Same idea. And what are misfortunes? Misfortunes are a natural consequence of the character and behavior of those who bear them. So again, we are creating our own unhappiness here, And these unhappiness, these misfortunes are a consequence of the character and behavior. So another thing for us to think about. So if we have the power to mitigate our sufferings and the misfortunes are coming from our character and behavior, then there is another nice tip here, right? So that's what we need to tackle. We need to look at the ways we are behaving and our character. And in the gospel, they will further explore this idea by giving us examples of ways in which we compromise our happiness in the present moment. So they will continue by saying, humans are victims of pride, imprudence, and ambition. And then practical examples. Marriages, they are the result of self-interest and vanity. Disagreements and quarrels that could be avoided with less susceptibility. Infirmities and illness, they are the consequence of intemperance and excesses. Unhappy parents who did not combat their kids' bad inclinations. So this is not so difficult to see how our own pride gets in the way of our happiness by creating distance, by creating separation, by creating conflicts. Our ambition that's usually driven by our sense of lack, our sense of smallness. So it's not a healthy ambition. It's an ambition that makes us walk over other people without taking other people's feelings into consideration. Marriages, so many marriages nowadays where everything happens so fast and people get married. And I tend to joke when I talk about this in my lectures. They meet one day, 3 months later, they are living together. 6 months, they are getting married, putting on Facebook that they have found the love of their life, and etc. And what do you really know about anyone in such a short period of time? So things have gone a little backwards, and a lot of times we are marrying for the wrong reasons, or without taking the time to truly get to know the person that we are getting married. So that will trigger a number of problems in our lives that perhaps didn't need to be there in the first place. It was not meant to be that way, but we are making choices all the time. And a lot of times, again, these choices are not being guided by the right reasons. Disagreements. We talk about often all the wars and all the tension and hostility that we see in the media, that we see among countries, and yet in our daily lives, in our family lives, in our work life, in the spiritual movement, so much resentment still, right? So many disagreements. We are so incredibly frail as human beings still. We get hurt so easily. So this is a great, great source of pain that we are creating as a result of our inability to relate with one another. For instance, infirmities, illnesses, so much that we suffer, that nowadays science has educated us. We have the resources to understand all the good things about how to care, for instance, for our body and for ourselves. And yet we live in a society of tremendous amount of excesses and disrespect to the physical body, and creating a source of pain and suffering that, no, it didn't necessarily needed to be there. We are creating for ourselves. Of course, all those things have emotional reasons underneath that need to be understood so that we can actually start to take better care of ourselves. And then nowadays I have 2 preteens in the house, and I can certainly see how easy it would be to, just say, forget it. I'm not going to be in this daily battle with you because you don't want to do this or you don't want to do that. And then we wash our hands and walk away. And then later on, we have a source of problems that is the result of our absence or our unwillingness to cope with the challenges of parenthood. And then we end up with a source of suffering that, again, perhaps didn't need to be there if we had been able to stick to our duty and do the work, because it is work, of raising our children to the best that we can. So those are just some examples. I think it's important that we talk about that, so those things are not so theoretical and we can see where and how we are creating unhappiness in our lives. Perhaps one of the problems is, where are we placing or looking for happiness is not necessarily the right place. And so I want to bring to you this recent survey that was done with millennials about their goals. They were asked, what were the most important goals in their lives? And 80% of them said that their primary goal was to get rich. Another 50% said that their goal was to be famous. And then all of them said that from the time they were born or the time they arrived to this country, that they were told that if they work really hard, that they would achieve the things that would give them happiness. And I mean, we can all agree that that's very much part of our culture and our belief system, right? So in America, you work hard, you get anywhere you want, you have the things that you want, and that is often associated with being happy. But another thing that I want to bring to you is this really outstanding study done in Harvard. It's called the Harvard Longitudinal Study of Adult Development, that seeks to understand human happiness. And this study started in 1938, as you see over there. It tracked the life of 724 young men, and it's been happening since then. There are some really, really nice TED Talks about this study. It has had generations of researchers actually giving continuity to the study, because it's such a long study, probably one of the longest studies that there is. So basically, in this study, they tracked the life of these men, asking about their work, their lives at home, their health, and of course, along the way, really not having a sense of how their lives would eventually unfold. So they had two groups. One group was sophomore students at Harvard, and they all finished their the university by the time of World War II, and the majority of them went on to serve in the war. And then there was a second group that were boys from Boston poorest neighborhoods. Boys were chosen to the study specifically because they were from some of the most troubled and disadvantaged families in Boston in the 1930s. So most of them live in really, really poor areas where a lot of times they didn't even have running water. So when they entered the study, all these young men, they were interviewed and they were given medical exams. The researchers went to their homes and they also interviewed their parents. Then they grew up and turned into adults and entered all walks of life. Some of them became factory workers, some of them became lawyers, some bricklayers, doctors. One of them became the president of the United States. Some of them developed alcoholism, some of them schizophrenia. Some of them climbed the social ladder from the bottom to the top, and some of them went in the opposite direction. But every 2 years, the researchers would send questionnaires, but even more than that, they would go to their homes, they would interview them, they would get their medical records from the doctors, they would draw blood, they would do CT scans of their brains, they talk to their children, and they also videotape them talking to their wives about their deepest concerns. So you can see was a very, very comprehensive research throughout many years. So what did they learn from the 10,000s of pages of information that they gathered from following the lives of these men? They learned two things: what happiness is not about and what happiness is about. Since this first part is what happiness is not about, so one thing became very clear, is that happiness was not about wealth, it was not about fame, and it was certainly not about working harder and harder. Interestingly, when we look at the Spirit's book on question 926, we learn that the wealthiest on earth is the one with fewer needs. Also, in the Gospel, again, in chapter 5, there is this very powerful sentence that says that neither wealth, power, nor even the flower of youth are the essential conditions for happiness. I would say more, not even the combining of these three much desired conditions are capable of producing happiness. So I hope that at this point we have an understanding of, like, again, what happiness is not about. Happiness cannot be placed outside of us. Happiness cannot be placed on the material, because the material is here one day and it's not going to be here the next day, not necessarily, right? No one is arguing that material means and wealth does not bring comfort to life. That would be silly. But comfort and happiness are different concepts altogether. And we know very well a lot of people who have a lot of resources and yet they don't have a happy life. And we know also, on the other hand, people who have very little, perhaps much less than all of us who are listening to this talk, and yet they are able to experience joy and happiness more than perhaps us. So what is happiness truly about? I would like to close this first part by bringing just a little story about Socrates, that he was walking on the street of Athens looking at some things that were on sale at a market on the street. And a merchant approached him and asked him, "Sir, what do you wish to buy?" And his answer was, "I'm only observing how many things are there that I do not need to be happy." Honestly, after I heard about this little story, I started like questioning my own self and the things that I buy, and for many reasons. But do I really need this to be happy, right? So it's just so nice to observe how many things are there that I do not need to be happy. So it's a proposal of like a small exercise for all of us to do. Very well. So moving on, so let's talk about the possible happiness that the Spirits told us it's available to us. So I'm going to bring up this book that's written by a psychologist. I have cited in other lectures before because I really like it a lot, which is The Upside of the Dark Side. And in this book, the researchers, the psychologists, they do talk about happiness, and they actually propose happiness as something that is not a butterfly moment. And I really like that expression. So we're going to try to define happiness that is not a butterfly moment. And what is a butterfly moment? A butterfly moment is like suddenly the butterfly lands on your hand, and you try to keep that moment because you're appreciating the beauty of the butterfly. But the next thing you know, before you know, it's gone. And that is a lot of times the happiness that we experience. It's very much fleeting. It's there one moment and the next moment is gone. So we're going to try to understand happiness that is a little bit more lasting, a little bit more resilient, and they will define happiness. Perhaps not a goal that we should be pursuing in life, but as the outcome of something that's bigger, the effect of something like wholeness, integration, and connection. So keep that on the back of your mind, that definition, especially the second part, the effect of something like wholeness, integration, and connection. So as you achieve wholeness, integration, and connection, then happiness should be the natural outcome of this state. In the same book, they also bring this analogy. That's a really interesting analogy, because they're going to say that happiness is not empty of stress and or conflict. So that's another important concept for us to understand. So not only complete happiness is not possible and is utopia in the world that we live in, but also happiness is not this constant state where, you know, we don't experience stress, we don't experience conflicts. And so they bring this idea that happiness is seeing persons who develop the ability to deal with the emotional equivalent of camping. If you know anything about me, you know that I have never camped in my life, right? Why? Why is the emotional equivalent of camping? Because when you go camping, right, if it's true camping, not these fancy campings of nowadays, there's no shower, there's no hot water, there is no toilet for you to flush. And so these are challenges, right? These are discomforts that the camping situation will bring. So what they say is that happiness is seen on persons, on individuals that develop this emotional, again, equivalent of camping. People who can handle some distress, who can face adversities, and emotionally not shy away from the feelings that naturally come up. Sometimes guilt, sometimes anger, sometimes feeling bad, sometimes feeling pain. So instead, they're able to withstand the discomfort of the camping situation and even draw some good things, some good lessons from that experience of discomfort. So if you were like me, you would ask, why would I want to camp when I can stay in a nice hotel? That's what I say all the time, right? As long as I have a nice hotel and a room to go back to at the end of the day, a comfortable bed and a nice hot shower, then yeah, I can spend my day on the wild. But that's me, could be my picture right over there. And they will say that they call this camping experience, the feelings, they call it distress tolerance. And they say that it makes you a better camper and it allows you to become stronger, wiser, mentally agile, and most important, happy in a resilient way. So again, we are trying here together to get a concept and an understanding of what can make us happy now. But we are looking for something more than the happiness of when we buy something, because like anything that we buy, it's nice the moment that we buy, but how long that moment lasts. And then what happens is it does not fulfill us in our essential needs. So therefore, for sure, 100% guarantee, in the next moment, you're going to be looking for the next thing to buy to make you happy, right? So we're in a point where we need something else, different, something lasting, something fulfilling. So we need to understand that, you know, being able to embrace discomfort, being able to embrace difficulties, make us more skilled and resourceful to be happy in a resilient way. This is also the concept that we find in the book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And this is a beautiful, beautiful concept that they bring in this book, which we see the commonality, the association of concepts between science, psychology, and religion in general. So they will say that joy is the inner experience of being able to be content. It's a permanent trait, a way of being that does not eliminate the frustrations of life, that does not avoid painful tears, but allow us to cry more easily and to smile more easily as well. We are talking about the inner joy that makes us more alive each day. It is the joy that makes us go through suffering in a way that enriches us instead of destroying us. I don't know about you. I love these statements so much. I find it hard to comment on it. I just want to keep reading it over and over and over. It is the joy that makes us go through suffering in a way that enriches us instead of destroying us. So it is the camper, right? The one who is able to, again, bear the discomfort, bear the challenges of life, and draw from it good experiences, good learning. It is this inner state that allows us to cry with freedom, to cry without shame, to cry in a healthy way, to be emotional, to be alive, to be present with whatever it is. This is the joy of living. And this is what we are trying to get to and to talk about today. Now, researchers of emotions have associated happiness, joy to a number of different feelings. And that's kind of similar to love. So we can think of joy, happiness as contentment, as excitement. When you get something really nice, you're very excited about an opportunity. You also feel happy when you're relieved. Like, for example, you're waiting for the result of a test, a diagnostic test, and you get that result, and the result is negative, for example, you feel relief, you feel joy. So it can be related to that. It can be wonder, it can be exaltation. I put a few, there were more feelings and more experiences of joy. When you accomplish something that you have worked so hard and you are, thrilled, right, for that accomplishment, bliss. And then there's these three experiences that have been the ones more closely related to a lasting type of joy. And they are gratitude, and to rejoice, and spiritual radiance. So let's look at them individually. So gratitude embraces all circumstances of life. So gratitude speaks about our relation to life. It is being grateful for every single aspect of life. It speaks about how we relate to life. Anything and everything that life brings on, you embrace, you take in, you recognize the value of that experience. There is no labeling of good or bad. There is only gratitude. So it's a relation to life, and it speaks deeply about your relation to God. When you rejoice, is the ability to rejoice at the happiness that you experienced, but also equally the happiness of others, which can be sometimes challenging for us. And so, again, the experience of feeling deeply, deeply content, not only with your own experience, but the happiness being felt elsewhere. Why is it so difficult for us? Because more often than not, we envy someone else's happiness, especially if it's in an area that we do not experience the same, does not have the same experience. And then we have spiritual radiance, which is defined as serene joy, born from deep well-being and benevolence. And we know that benevolence is this state of being able to move in life, understanding that the purpose of life is service. And so the purpose of life is to put love in movement, which is the definition of charity, right? So there is happiness in benevolence. There is happiness in giving, because the more we give, the more we receive. The more we give, the more we understand that we have to give. The more we give, the more we understand all the immensity and the potential of love that lies within us, and helps us to shift from this position of scarcity and lack to a position of empowerment and being resourceful and consciousness of our own essence. So it also talks about it's something that we have to do towards ourselves as well as towards others. So when I look at the common denominator for these experiences, they're all relational. So perhaps happiness has something to do with relationships. Well, let's see what Harvard study found out about happiness, right? Because we did talk about what it was not, but we haven't told you yet about their findings in terms of what happiness is about. So remember, different men, entire life, some end up one end up the president of the United States, some went up, some went down, very different background, socioeconomical status, different life, their lives unfold very differently. So what was the defining component of happiness? Good relationships keep us happier and healthier. The men who turn out to be the happiest, regardless of their background and socioeconomic status, were the ones who were more skilled to relate and who valued relationships. Lessons learned from the study. Social connections bring happiness. It is not about the number of connections you have in life, but the quality of the connections. And then secure attachment to other, knowing you can, which means knowing you can count on people, not only affects physical health, but also brain health. Okay, so social connection. Now, let's make one thing very clear here. We are not talking about Facebook or any social media. We're also not talking about the 2,000, 3,000, I don't know how many thousand friends you have or people following you on your social media. We're talking about real connection. We are talking about people that you can count on, whether you're in close proximity to them, whether you see them often or not. We're talking about real connection, knowing people, counting on people, relating to people. So this is what guarantees, this is the greatest source and the lasting source of happiness for us. And then makes us think. And I think each one needs to ask this question: how is the quality of you relating these days? Do people have a lot of things to complain about you, right? How is your network of friends? Not 100 friends. Do you have a group of people that you can count on? People, they're close to you. And friendship is also a concept that it's relative. It's because some friends are very, very close friends, but there are friends that are not like on the day-to-day with you, but people that you have true affinity, you care truly about. You know that although they're not there next to you every day, you can count on them if you need them, right? So, but I think it's important for us to look at the quality of our relationships. How are we relating to our close friends? How are we relating to the world? How much value we give to relationships? Are we someone who rather be alone, rather be away from people? Are we thinking that people are too crazy, too bad, too evil, not worth it of our presence? right? So those are questions that are important for us to ask. And we'll get to our last piece right now. So first piece was about understanding what was not happiness. Then we look a little bit into happiness from a spiritist, from a religious, from a psychological perspective. And now we get into our last part, which is maximizing happiness. How do we do that now that we have all this understanding? So going back to question 921, right? We already read that first little piece that you see there in gray. The question will continue by saying, if they, us, would practice the law of God, they would spare themselves many misfortunes and enjoy happiness as great as their existence on such dense plane will allow. Okay, so there you go. Practice the law of God. So that's the key. That's the key for our talk today. We need to practice God's law. All right, so if the key for happiness is the practice of God's law, the question is, what do we know about God's law? Shouldn't we be investing in knowing, in understanding, and practicing God's law? Okay, so question 614 helps us by saying the natural law is the law of God. It is the only true law necessary for the happiness of human beings. It shows what they should or should not do, and they only suffer misfortunes because they reject it or we walk away from it. So let's again emphasize this point. The only true law necessary for human happiness. Anything else that we are doing to achieve happiness that is outside of that, we're off. We're missing the target big time, right? So let's further understand this law. Question 617 now. All the laws of nature are divine because God is the author of all things. Scientists study the laws of matter, where more individuals study and follow those of the soul. Okay, so the law has two components, a material component and a moral component. And in the same question, Kardec is going to comment and explain a little bit of this concept by saying, among the divine laws, some regulate movement and relations of base matter. There are the physical laws, and studying them belong to the domain of science. Others specifically concern humans and their relationship with God, their fellow beings, encompassing rules of the life of the body and those of the soul. They are the moral laws. The laws are one. They are the laws that govern base matter, and that's studied by science. And then there is law that concern human beings in their relationships. Keyword, folks, relationships, right? So psychology is telling us, the research, science is telling us relationships. And here, the divine laws, they are there to guide us in terms of our relations to whom? To ourselves, to others, and to God itself. Okay, so in order to accomplish that, God sent us Jesus as our standard model guide for the practice of the law. He's the highest standard of moral perfection in his doctrine. His life is the purest expression of the law. He is the purest being that has ever walked on earth. So we have the laws, key for happiness, the practice of the law. We understand that those laws help us with our moral development, guiding our relationships related to our relating. Now, Jesus' life is the purest expression of the law, so we have a guide. So we need to ask ourselves, how did Jesus relate to us? Did you ever see Jesus putting anyone down Did you ever see Jesus diminishing anyone? Did you ever see Jesus gossiping about people? Did you ever see Jesus pointing out errors to humiliate anyone? So the way Jesus related to us was always to dignify us, always to uplift everyone. He treated all of us equally, with the same love, with the same compassion, with understanding of our humanity, with acceptance of where we are in our evolution. So we must seek to mirror in our behaviors, in our actions, in our thoughts, in our relating those principles that he exemplified, because he is the purest expression of the law. And why is that so difficult? Because we are so wounded, because we are so far from feeling our real nature, because we live in a paradigm of lacking. We feel constantly inadequate. We feel constantly small. And as long as we are in this place, it's hard. It's hard to treat others that way, because we're always trying to surpass our brothers and sisters, as opposed to hold their hands and say, let's go, let's do it together, let's grow together. Because you know what? In God's hearts, there is a place for everyone to be equally loved, equally special. But in addition to that, God gives us the laws in our consciences. So we have a model, we have the laws within us, and we have individuals that come from time to time to remind us about these laws. These are God's missionaries. But there's more. In question 619, Kardec is going to ask, has God provided all humans the means of knowing the law? Because some people say, well, the law is in us, but not everybody knows it. Not everybody's aware of it. So here is what is important about this answer. The spirits are going to say, all may know it, but not all understand it. So it's true that we all know, but we don't have the same level of understanding of the law and its implications. Moral persons, who are moral persons? It's defined elsewhere in the Spirit's book. Able to distinguish good from evil and to do good for all. And those who desire to examine it are the ones who understand it best. On question 626, the spirits are going to say, since the divine laws are written in the book of nature, men and women are able to understand them as soon as they want to look into them. So notice that I underline the who shouldn't be underlined. My intent was to underline the two verbs. One needs to desire. One needs to want. What has happened thus far is that for the most part, we have evolved as a result of the force of the law of progress, as if there is God's hand pushing us forward out of our passivity, out of our inertia. And that is what has brought upon humanity so much suffering and so much trouble, because we have been passive learners. What we need to do to maximize happiness is to take upon ourselves the responsibility, the willingness to learn the law consciously. We need to be checking our actions, our thoughts, our feelings every day, in every relationship, in every circumstance, to understand what we're doing right and where we're failing. And more importantly, why are we failing in our quest to abide to the law? This needs to be a new awareness. This needs to be an active intent of every single day and every single moment of our lives, if we want to experience more happiness, the relative happiness available to us today and now. And in question 631, do humans have the means within them to distinguish good from evil? Yes, when they believe in God and they desire to know God, who has given them intelligence to discern one from the other. Again, sometimes we read those questions a little too quickly, or, when we're just doing kind of a reading, we're not necessarily able, different than when we're studying, to put those things together and find like these nuances, or perhaps they're not so much nuances. Perhaps for some it's quite obvious how in all the answers the spirits are highlighting the necessity of us being active participants of the process. I'm going to end with this statement by Joana de Angelis in the introduction of the book Existential Conflicts, and a very quick story. Happiness in the world is possible once the desire to obtain it has been developed, and the spirit becomes proactive in disentangling it from the past and building new achievements. No one was put on earth only to suffer, but rather to create the conditions to real health and plentiful joy. Much of the suffering we experience has to do with our passivity and the lack of priority given to a type of living that relates with what is truly essential in our lives. So, if you want to summarize this in a very nice way, what I've been trying to say, right? So, we have to actively desire to obtain. We have to, again, bring this new awareness to our lives. If we understand that relationships and the practice of God's laws in relationships is the key for our happiness, we need to be investing our resources, our time in looking at our relationships, in looking at particularly not how people relating to us, although the way people relate to us is a very good cue, especially if we're humble enough to understand that people act in certain ways towards us quite often in response to the way that we're acting towards them, right? So it can be a very resourceful way of getting to know yourself and working on our own limitations so that we can improve our relating. And like I said, we've been, very passively progressing, which brings a great source of suffering. So maximizing happiness is about taking charge of improving our relating and abiding to God's laws in our relationships. And finally, I would like to finish with the story of this man whose name escapes my mind at this moment, Jerônimo Mendonça. And he is well known in the Brazilian spirits movement. He was a healthy individual, but who, like any young man, he liked to play soccer. But at some point, he was taken by rheumatoid arthritis, who paralyzed his body. He also became blind, and but that never really paralyzed his spirit. And he is known for his work in the Spiritist movement. He opened a few centers in Brazil. He traveled all over the country doing lectures and helping others in the bed that you see him in. Quite remarkable life, quite remarkable spirit. And one day in an interview, he was asked by the interviewer, what happiness would be for him. And his answer was, I would be happy if I could turn to the side. So he could not turn. He was stuck in this position. And when I heard this story and I was putting this presentation together, it came to me that perhaps this is what we need to do a little bit more. I even got a little emotional. I'm not sure why. But I think we have been, as humanities, stuck in one position, which is looking straight ahead, as if our souls have been paralyzed in that one position, unable to see the person next to us, unable to turn our heads perhaps a little bit more often to the needs, to the humanity of the people that are next to us, to be more empathic. We are so focused on our own self, my goals, my ambition, my future, my life. In that way, we keep going forward, alienating the people who are next to us, unable to truly see them for who they are, unable to truly understand their pain, understand where they come from, where they are in their lives, in their struggles. We become so oblivious to even the people who are the closest to us. And perhaps the moment that we live today is a moment that's calling us to regain some movement and turn our heads and look to the person next to us, to leave these emotional, spiritual paralysis that we have been in and be able to see more people, to reach out to more people, to relate to more people, to expand our world. Because outside of love, there is no salvation. Outside of relating, there is no salvation. Thus, the law of society. We're not going to be able to do it alone. We cannot achieve enlightenment by meditating on the top of a mountain. We need to open our hearts to people, to humanity. Our lives need to be about building a spiritual family. Our lives need to be about expanding the boundaries of our heart to embrace more and more people, to include more and more people. Not only the people who think like us, but the people who also think differently than us. We need to expand our paradigms of relating. We need to finally say to Jesus, yes, yes, I will try every day. I am committed every day to love my enemies, which means to have a space in my heart to recognize that although we have difficulties, they are just like me, a very, very special child of God. And we have, if we want to be happy, we have to end our quarrels. We have to make peace with our enemies while we are on the way, especially if we want to be happy today. So this, my friends, is today's message. I hope that you can take home these concepts, this invitation, this challenge. Why not, right? And of course, it's not going to be perfect. And I don't think that neither Jesus or God expect from us perfection. But I do think that they expect from us commitment. I do think that they expect from us renewed commitment each day, and the commitment to value others, and the commitment to move forward, expanding each day more and more our spiritual family. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzana. Wow. What a message. What an important message, especially nowadays, what everybody's going through, and how to find the happiness in every moment. I love it. Love everything that was brought to us. Thank you so much. Let's see if we have any questions after all this made us even really emotional, because it is applying Spiritist messages and all in our lives, that's for sure. So let's see. Do you believe the amount of sadness and despair seen in the world today are based in the misconception of happiness itself?
I would say yes and no. I would say I don't think the amount of sadness has to be with the misconception of happiness. I think there's plenty of reason for us to be sad. You know, it would be too cold and too detached if we didn't feel sad with, you know, let's take one example, the death of our loved ones, right? It is the dying process for us in our stage of evolution, and it's answered by the spirits in the fourth part of the spirits book, that this is a real source of suffering for us on this planet. So the spirits are telling us that, given our condition, the physical separation is a real source of sadness, of suffering. So we have reasons to be sad, yes, but we don't have reasons to be desperate. So I think that in that sense, yes, there misunderstanding where happiness lies, but also misunderstanding what life is truly about, the essence of our of who we are and what our life is about, that causes and brings a level of suffering that you know, with the right mindset, it can be avoided.
Too, yeah, makes lots of sense. Is it possible to define complete happiness? That's from Professor Gilbert Soares.
Yes, yes, it is possible. Complete happiness is the presence of the kingdom of heaven within us, proposed by Jesus. And I recommend going to the Spirit's book, the Gospel, where they talk about the scale of the spirits, and you're going to look at the pure spirits, right? And so they don't have any of, they are completely free of all these human feelings, passions, right? So there's only goodness, there's only love. And so that is what completely happiness is about, is when you are fully aligned with God's laws, when you are fully aligned with your essence of a child of God and immortal being, and you know, you're free of, you no longer need to incarnate, because you don't need experience this type of experiences to evolve anymore. We continue to evolve forever, but you know, without any presence of suffering. So yes, but I think the explanation that you find in the gospel when you read the characteristics of the pure spirits, even when you go to like the regeneration world, and you read that, you're like, wow, my goodness, I want to be in this world, because there's no jealousy, there is no, like, you know, like some worlds, you know, the physical body no longer undergoes like the physical painful deterioration with the level of illnesses that we experience in this realm, because they are still equivalent and relative to the level of our moral development and consciousness. So just that, just imagine that. Just imagine living in a body that does not undergo this. It dies, because its matter dies, but doesn't undergo these painful and processes that we experience here. That would be such an incredible happiness, right? And so in the gospel, you can read, like, you know, what each one of these worlds look like and what the characteristics would be. But in general, just imagine the kingdom of God within you, right? All love, no harm ever done, and complete alignment with God's laws.
Thank you. Yeah. Do you feel someone can find gratefulness in life even when they don't accept the existence of spirituality?
That's I think so. I think so. I think that let me think for a second. There are people who they claim not to be spiritual per se, but they are without knowing. You know, perhaps they don't like believe in God per se, or spirits or anything like that, but they are deeply tuned with goodness, and you know, and they are able to appreciate life in ways in which again they appreciate, they're able to recognize that even in the difficulties, they're able to take good things out of it, that the difficulties contribute to who they have become and to who they are in the present moment. And so sometimes people just have a look at life that they embrace some of these important characteristics. Their life is already full of meaning and meaningful actions and useful in ways that, you know, they can experience this level of gratitude. And they may not say, I don't believe in anything, but who knows what experience have they had in the past. We all have reincarnated, we all have died and are born again. So maybe some of those experiences are in the background or buried deep in their unconscious, but they're not dead, they're there. And, you know, perhaps are underlying the way they see the world right now, and especially the way they feel the world and they relate to life. I think I would need to think further about this question, I confess. That's my best in this moment.
Well, I think we're so used to labels, right? I mean, you are spiritual if you believe in so and so, right? But some people just, that, like you said, they bring already with them, right? That sense already of the spirituality without using the words. They are there, and they're able to find that joy, that gratitude, even without saying, but the way they live. That's a good point. Let's see, we still have some more time for questions. Do you believe the amount of sadness? Oh, that we
read that already.
We read that one already. Let's see next. What's the source of happiness in the spiritual world?
Good relationships. The spiritual world is not different than the material world, right? Actually, what we have here is a poor copy or of, you know, what the life, I mean, life is about connection. It's about relating. So what makes the good spirits happy is that they relate to humanity. You know, it's all love in all relationships. They don't get hurt. So imagine if Jesus would get hurt because we crucify him, right? So he didn't get hurt. He doesn't need to forgive us. He was never hurt in first place. So it is funny how we tend to separate, you know, spiritual and the material, but it's all spiritual, right? It's one humanity. It's all the same spirits. We're either outside of our body or inside of our body, but the laws are the same. The divine laws apply to us equally, no matter in which dimension we are in. So in the spiritual realm, yes, the great source of happiness is to be able to relate and to love. Love is the great source of happiness, always. And yep, that's pretty much it.
That's good. Yeah, we just continue, right? Let's continue evolving and learning. And as you said, we're spirits, right? Does expectation have a lot to do with finding or not finding happiness?
Sure. It depends on, again, it goes back to that piece of the lecture. It's like, where are you putting your expectations? What type of expectations do you have, right? So one great source of unhappiness is when we expect people certain things and they don't meet our expectations, which is usually our own problem. It's the problem of the one who bears the expectations, because we are often, our expectation does not match what the person can deliver. So we expect from people what we believe they can deliver, or a level of awareness that we believe they have based on what we see. But usually what we see is a very fragmented, small portion of who people are and their inner world. So a great source, again, of suffering and unhappiness is frustration with people. And that's not people's problems. It's your problem. It's your expectation about them that did not match. Same way people get frustrated with us. I expected so much more from you. I'm sorry. That's where I am. I'm trying. I too expect, and that's another great source of unhappiness, is when our expectation of ourselves are also unrealistic. Because a lot of times we expect so much from us. Because I know all of this, because I'm speak for myself, right? So because I'm doing this lecture and I did this study, should I live here and behave in a certain way? So I need to be realistic with myself. I'm still a very self-centered person. I can be very rigid at times. I understand that. I know that it's not going to be a miraculous transformation. But like I said in the presentation, I am, and this I can say, I am committed every single day to have a better relationship with myself and with others. And I keep working on that. So every single little step, when you set your expectations at the right place, take into consideration your potential, but also your humanity, then you appreciate every single gain that you make. And you are able to forgive yourself for your mistakes, right? And you're able to recoup and to move forward. And so, yes, I think that the expectations can be a great source of unhappiness. And we need to, part of the challenge is to set the right expectations for ourselves. We shouldn't set expectations for others, only for ourselves.
Yeah, that's the tough part. And also the expectation that we have about happiness, right? I mean, if we set the wrong expectations about what happiness really is, we'll never achieve. Like you said, we're going to try the wrong target. We'll never get there. So
yes, and another thing, Tanya, is when we put the expectation in happiness depending on others. So my expectation of happiness depend on my children, depend on my spouse, depend on my friends, right? You don't have control over anyone else but you. So one of the great things that Spiritism does is gives us the resources to be happy, regardless of where other people are. Happiness, as we talk about, comes from within. It's the happiness of being alive. It's the happiness of growing. It's the happiness of loving. We must be our primary source of happiness. We cannot put our happiness in the hands of others, because we definitely setting ourselves for failure.
Yeah, and this is a very bad habit. You hear all the time, like you said, including ourselves. Let's pay attention what our expectations are. We cannot depend on others, and we also think others we give that power to others sometimes, and nobody has it but ourselves, which we feel very empowered on that, and a lot of responsibility too. We have time for one more question. If the laws are in our consciences, does that mean nobody has excuses not to know how to look for happiness in the right place?
That's a very tough question. Yeah, there are excuses.
We always find them, right?
We always find them. No, and it's not an excuse, but it's an understanding that it's a process, right? So, like the spirits mentioned to Kardec, the law is in our conscience. So, instinctively, intuitively, we kind of know that something's not right. Something, But the understanding of the law is progressive. We understood God's laws in a certain way when we live in the caves, and we understand God's laws better today. Now, those laws have always been in our conscience from the moment we became humans and acquire intelligence. But we can see that our understanding of the law today is much different than it was, so many years ago. Thus, the improvement in the human laws that gradually reflect more and more our divine awareness of, for example, equality and justice and things like that. So it's not necessarily an excuse, but it's gradual. I mean, as we grow, as we learn, as we better understand the law, we are also going to be able to make better choice for ourselves.
Thank you. That very good points. Really, we have a lot of food for thought, a lot of material there that makes us really, like we said, empowered, at the same time taking the responsibility in our hands. So it was a great talk, great points. Thank you so much, Suzana, to bring that to us today.
You're very welcome.
Well, hopefully we are going to get you here back sometime soon.
Let's see. Yeah, sure, of course, I'm glad.
Okay, thank you. And thank you everyone who watched this live and those who have been following our Saturday series of lives every Saturday at 11 a.m. Don't miss next week, May 1st, Julio Carvalho from New Jersey is going to be speaking about the source of happiness and unhappiness in the spiritual plane. So we continue talking about happiness, right? So there is definitely a very key topic for all of us. Another very important announcement is that our annual National Spiritist Symposium is coming up on June 5th and 6th. Suzana will be there with us, don't miss. We are going to be having both days at the same hours from 2 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And this year, once again, it will be virtual, a virtual event. The theme of the symposium is Mediums and Mediumship in celebration of the 106th anniversary, 60th anniversary of the Mediums book. So there'll be talks, roundtable discussions, Q&A, a special youth panel, and the youth will be discussing different aspects of mediumship, but also all of us will be doing that. And last year, we had the public asking, they liked the session, Spiritism Ask Me Anything. So we're having that again this year. So don't miss, save the date, June 5th and 6th, starting at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Hope to see you next week. Thanks again, and stay with us every week at this time. Bye-bye.
Bye.